Welcome to Digital Hauntology, a channel where I write essays on video games. Sometimes these are done in review form, while others are more editorial in nature, where I use the game that I'm covering as a jumping off point to discuss other topics. But today's video is part 4 of a more informal project on this channel, a project that I call Ranking Every Video Game Ever Made, with a video in this style being made after every 5 videos on this channel. All of this is being done in an attempt to have an answer to that weird question that we all get sometimes, with that question being, hey, what is the best game that you've ever played? And hopefully, after this video, I'll be one step closer to having an answer for that question. So, with the intro out of the way, on to the video proper. Hi, I am the dude behind this Digital Hauntology channel. You can call me Haunt, you can call me Mr. Hauntology, or you can call me by my real name, which is Nick. I already mentioned what I'm going to be doing here in this video in the intro, but that is going to be taking every game that I've covered since the last one of these ranking videos and putting it here on this list in an attempt to see where they stack up, with an ultimate goal of figuring out what the best game I've ever played actually is, at least according to my opinion. Quick disclaimer before I get started. When I'm doing these ranking videos, I'm just trying to give you a quick snapshot of my opinion of the game. If you want a deep dive and you want to see a more nuanced approach, please check out the actual videos because that's where I get into the weeds with these things. Okay, so first game that we covered on this channel since the last session is going to be Gry Hill Incident. Gry Hill Incident being the survival horror alien abduction game. I was really excited for it when I saw the trailer. Cool music, dope atmosphere, kind of Pacific Northwest meets X-Files kind of vibe, and the writing looked like it was, B-tier schlock. I love that kind of stuff. And you get some of that in the game. You get really cool flying saucers in terms of flying over the cornfields. You get the really dope atmosphere that is like the mist-covered woods. And the writing is cheesy and sometimes really funny. Mechanically, though, that game is a mess. And it really comes down to poor checkpointing, teleporting AI, and just a really bad stamina management system. Everything that you can utilize to get away from these aliens in this game costs stamina, and it all drains way too quickly. If you're sprinting, you get winded within, 100 feet. And the aliens just kind of shamble behind you, and they can always outpace you. You have a baseball bat, which every swing, it just depletes your gauge. And yeah, it functions more like a wet pool noodle when you hit them with it. It requires 3 hits before you down them. And even once they're downed, you're not getting away very quickly. So playing the game felt like a slog. It shouldn't have. It had the potential to be a lot cooler. But it should be stated that the team has been patching the game since it came out. And I went back and played a little bit, and a lot of the issues that I had have since been remedied. Not fixed completely, but they are better now. And so the game is still a slog, but it's just a slightly less, tedious slog. So originally when I was playing this game, I was thinking it was probably going to be worse than Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach. Post-patch, I think that it's more playable. And the games are very similar in the sense that bad AI cripples the experience, poor checkpointing in both, manual saves in Five Nights at Freddy's, and both of them get a lot of mileage out of their setting. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put Gry Hill Incident right above Five Nights at Freddy's because I think that it does edge it out in playability at this point. Now, the next game that I covered on this channel is going to be one that I've been actually kind of dreading putting on this list, and it's because it's controversial. It's going to be Final Fantasy 16. Final Fantasy 16 is a game that I was really looking forward to, like everybody else. I'm a huge Final Fantasy fan, and it's really a game that I'm of two minds of. When the game is working, when it's doing the action sequences and you have all the spectacle and it's a very character-focused type game, I think that it's 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 material. Some of these cinematics are just jaw-dropping. and some of the world building is pretty cool. However, you spend maybe one third, maybe a fourth of the game in these actual like action stages where the story feels like it's really getting pushed forward. The rest of the game is spent in a very generic fetch questy kind of moment to moment, going from place to place, giving people, whatever MacGuffin you're carrying, and just slogging through everything. I mean, it is incredibly boring for hours and hours at a time. Um, and I don't know, like, how do you rectify that? Because when the game is doing its thing, great game. When it's just kind of meandering about, I don't know, man. Like, I would put it at like 4 out of 10 at times. Combat is good, excellent even at times. But the problem that I had in it is that the enemies, they die very, very quickly. It's a very easy game. And so even though you have all these options at your disposal, you don't really get to utilize too many of them because the enemies will be dead but before you even complete like one real cool rep. And then there's the other type of enemies, which is just about depleting their stagger gauge or their will bar so that you can stagger them, and then just going through your MMO type rotation with your cooldown abilities. And yeah, so how do I place this where I'm basically giving credit to the best parts of this game and also being cognizant of the fact that so much of it was boring? And like my eyes kind of like they're drawn here to Valkyrie Profile Lilith, right? Valkyrie Profile Lilith, it has a lot of issues. It's definitely a really cool story. It's got a really novel battle system at play. But Final Fantasy 16, I don't know. I feel like I liked Final Fantasy 16 more. I think the high points in that game go way higher than some of the stuff in Lilith. I I guess I'm looking more right here. 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim is a game where it is half visual novel, or no, it's part visual novel and then part SRPG where you do mech battles. And that can definitely be boring for hours at a time as well. I still really like the experience, but I do feel like, the two different elements of that game are disconnected in some fundamental ways. So I think that Final Fantasy 16 definitely edges out Aegis Rim. I'm uncomfortable putting it higher than Voice of Cards: The Forsaken Maiden, and really these two games are kind of interesting to put against one another. Final Fantasy 16 to me is kind of an embarrassment of riches. You have, a huge budget, you have incredibly cutting edge graphics at times, um, slick battle systems. Everything is kind of going in this game's direction, and then so much of the experience kind of just fumbles that by making it so that you're just kind of putting around. Voice of Cards: The Forsaken Maiden, however, is kind of the opposite approach. It is a very budget-friendly game. It uses a card motif, like a trading card game motif, for everything. So your characters are just static character portraits. And they actually use this really basic approach to great effect. Um, it's really story focused. The scenario is excellent. There's multiple arcs that you go through. And then even though the combat is just, kind of typical um, turn-based RPG mechanics, they find some wiggle room in there to really make the battles extremely interesting. And I think that I've mentioned this before, but Voice of Cards: The Forsaken Maiden has one of my favorite boss battles of all time in it. I think that, encounter to encounter, it's good, and then there are times where that game just goes completely out of control. So I'm not comfortable putting Final Fantasy 16 above that one. I think that Forsaken Maiden is one of the best RPGs I've played in years. Now, the next game that I have on this list is going to be Soulstice. It's a little hack and slash title from Reply Game Studios, an Italian developer, and I had never heard of it prior to playing it. One of my buddies recommended it to me and said, check it out, you'll love it. And he wasn't wrong. Really, really cool art direction. The soundtrack is one of my favorites that I've ever heard in a video game. And, you know, really what it comes down to, it's Berserk meets Claymore meets Devil May Cry. And the battle system in that game is just constantly evolving. It starts off with just kind of four hit strings, but by the end of it, you are changing forms, you are managing multiple meters, you are basically identifying which enemies you're fighting and identifying their weaknesses in your rotating weapon wheel. So you're constantly just like, this one needs to be hit with a sledgehammer, this one needs to be hit with an axe. I'm going to have, or not an axe, but sword. This one's going to be hit with daggers. And you are just manipulating the area. And then there's these color coded enemies that come into play. And every encounter is basically you quickly identifying what you have to do and then executing as quickly as possible. Story is really like strong. Voice acting is really good. I just think that it punches above its weight in almost every single way. And it's a great action game. So, where am I going to put it on this list? Immediately I'm drawn to Final Fantasy 16 again. Final Fantasy 16 is, a really good action game when all systems are working really well. It's very smooth. However, Solstice actually has levels of strategy that are just missing from Final Fantasy 16. Like I said, with Final Fantasy 16, you are kind of just juggling the jobber enemies around as much as you can before they just kind of fizzle out. And then the rest of the game comes down to deplete will and dump your skills on them. And, even enemies like bombs that have been present in Final Fantasy for, generations now, console generations now, they don't even have like weaknesses. There's no weaknesses to exploit in that game. And so you're just always executing your best rotation. So I do think I'm going to put Solstice one above Final Fantasy 16. When it comes down to it, I would rather play Solstice again than play Final Fantasy 16 again. And I honestly think that I don't think I'm ever going back to Final Fantasy 16 unless there is like some sort of big DLC drop or, some sort of reason to go back. If it's just this current game, I think I've seen it. And I'm not a huge fan, but I do really appreciate some of the heavier moments in that game. I think there is a lot to celebrate here, but there's a lot to just, yeah, I don't think I'm going back. So, that said, the next video that I did was kind of more of a chill one. I watched Twisted Metal, the TV show on Peacock, and I became a really big fan of it. Very early kind of Firefly vibes to that whole production. And I loved the comedy, even though some of it was hit and miss. And I just thought that there was a lot there with the characterization and the action. I loved the show. And so it kind of got my brain going, and I was like, I want to go back and play some of these Twisted Metal games. So I downloaded everything that was available on PSN, which was Twisted Metal 1, Twisted Metal 2, and Twisted Metal Black. And I covered all those in the same video. Twisted Metal 1, Twisted Metal 1995, there was a Twisted Metal game just called Twisted Metal released in, I think, 2013. That was the PS3 one. I'll have to fact check the date later. But Twisted Metal 1, it's not that fun to play. It's an old game. It kind of functions more like a tech demo. I understand that at the time that it came out, it was very impressive. It won EGM's Game of the Year for 1995. And, there's definitely things to be appreciated here. But in the scope of other Twisted Metal games, it is definitely missing a lot of its identity. The handling of the vehicles is not great. The sound effects are crazy. And it's just a really poor performing game. Low frame rate, warping textures. It's a slog. It's not great. It's not very responsive. But you can tell that there is a idea present here that will eventually grow into what Twisted Metal became proper. So at the time of this writing, I am going to put Twisted Metal 1 towards the bottom of the list. It's not that fun to play. And I do think that Five Nights at Freddy's, it has some going for it with, its world design and some of its encounters. I think that the Sun Moon attendant thing in the tube maze was really, really cool. And the whole environment, the Pizzaplex, is just great to explore. Twisted Metal, I just wanted it to be over, to be honest. And I wanted to go back to some of the other titles. Because when I was a kid, I played a little bit of Twisted Metal 2. I was happy to go back and check that one out. And Twisted Metal Black is the one that I really remembered. Twisted Metal just feels like it's we're not quite where the series needs to go. And as a sad twist of fate, one of the best things to come out of the original Twisted Metal was actually cut from the original game, and that's its ending cinematics for each character. They cut it. I guess the developers thought that they were too offensive at the time, and they were inevitably made available through the Twisted Metal head-on re-release for the PS2, the extra Twisted edition. And it's a blessing that we got those, because they are comedy gold. They're these just really low resolution, just low budget kind of horror twist endings, and they're great. They're the best part of this experience, and they are missing from the original release. So, and then I just kind of think it's important for me to say that I'm not really somebody that is swayed by nostalgia. Um, just because a game was once put into high regard, it doesn't mean that it gets to sit on its laurels for the rest of its life. Twisted Metal 1 is not fun to play in 2023. It might have been the best game to play in 1995, but I'm not going to go ahead and recommend something just because, back in the day it was cutting edge. So, Twisted Metal 2, however, I do think that is a huge improvement. Um, it plays better, the vehicles control better, there's a better roster, the combat is more interesting, they add special abilities that you can do with button inputs, and destructible environments like the Eiffel Tower. The ending cutscenes are a lot of fun. They have kind of Tales of the Crypt Keeper kind of vibe to them. And the whole experience just feels more fully realized. And it's a good game. It's a really good game. And I get why people kind of put it in high regard. As far as I understand, in terms of the debate of what the best, whatever the best, in terms of the debate of which is the best Twisted Metal, people usually say 2, Black, or Head On. And I see why 2 is held in such high regard. Now, in terms of where we're going to put it on this list, I don't think it goes above Wanted Dead. My reasoning here is that Twisted Metal is a video game-ass video game. It's got a punk rock aesthetic. It's just kind of fun for fun's sake. And I think Wanted Dead is the same kind of type of game. Just coming from, what if we did something cool mentality. And I think that Wanted Dead just kind of wins out in terms of playability. I think that it's, a crazy game, even though sometimes you're laughing at it instead of with it. But yeah, I think Twisted Metal 2 is definitely a good time. And I think, it beats out something like Voice of Cards, The Isle Dragon Roars. I think that that particular game has a lot going for it, but it can be a little vanilla at times, even though there is enough here that is novel that I think it's worth checking out. I think Twisted Metal 2, yeah, I'm happy putting it right there. Now, Twisted Metal Black. Twisted Metal Black is, again, another improvement over everything that had come before it. It's running at 60 frames per second. It's super playable. One of my favorite personal rosters in the series. And then the ending cutscenes, or the cutscenes surrounding these characters, they are a lot of fun, even though they may have not aged too well. They used to scare me when I was a kid when this game first came out, but now I feel like they are more at home with something like, I don't know, Xavier Renegade Angel.
What doth life?
So yeah, it's a great improvement over Twisted Metal 2. Some people would disagree because they like the more raucous vibe of Twisted Metal 2, whereas Black got pretty bleak. But I still don't think it's quite the improvement to knock Wanted Dead. Wanted Dead just kind of rules. It's stupid, but so is Twisted Metal in all of its incarnations. So I'm gonna put Twisted Metal Black right there. Now, the final game for today's session is going to be Quantum Break. Quantum Break being the 2016 release from Remedy, the same studio that brought you Alan Wake, Max Payne, and Control. And it's a strange game. It's a third-person shooter with, time manipulation skills. You can freeze an enemy in place and just mag dump on them. You can run faster than time and just mess with your enemy's perception. And it's this very linear, set piece driven third person shooter that is basically utilizing real actors because of the other, component to this game. So Shawn Ashmore, Iceman from the X-Men movies. He's your lead. You have enemies like Lance Reddick, who is clearly the best part of this experience. He just chews up the scenery in every scene that he's in, and he's a terrific villain. So basically the structure of this game is play a level, then you go into this little, contained level where you make a choice that impacts the events of the story and then the TV show component. And then you're launched into a TV episode of basically this show called Quantum Break. So structure is play a level, watch a TV show. Play a level, watch a TV show. And by the end of it, you watch a short season of a TV show. And it's really pretty cool. I haven't ever experienced anything like it. It's the way that, some of your actions actually affect both the gameplay and the TV show. They're really cool. And then the characterization for some of these side characters that you would only see in in-game character portraits attached to emails, they suddenly are fleshed out to a level where I think some of the side characters end up mattering. They end up mattering more to the plot, or the overall plot, than any of the main characters. So, where would I put it? And again, I'm drawn to Aegis Rim. I think that, Aegis Rim, it's a combination of different mediums to tell a story in a non-conventional way. And I think Quantum Break fits that bill too. And I think that Quantum Break does it just slightly better. Or it does it better. So I'm going to put it above that. Now, Final Fantasy 16. I would rather play Quantum Break than Final Fantasy 16 any day of the week. Again, I already mentioned it. I don't see myself going back to Final Fantasy 16. I can definitely see going back to Quantum Break, just revisiting it from time to time. It's a good game. The only glaring weakness of Quantum Break is that there is a very limited amount of enemy encounters in which you get to really play with the mechanics of the game. But when it is firing on all of its cylinders, I think that it is a better combat experience than most other shooters. And it's never quite as boring as Final Fantasy 16. So that's going to be it for this session. If you agree with me, disagree with me, have any opinions on how this list is shaping up, feel free to drop a comment below. We can get into a little bit back and forth. I'm not afraid of conversation. And so that's going to be the end of this video. I hope to see you in the next one. And until then, you're all beautiful people, and I hope you have a great day.